Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Yosefa Fogel-Rubel, and this is One-on-One, Women Talk Torah, a series brought to you by Matan Women's Institute for Torah Study. Welcome back to the Matan podcast. I want to remind everyone that we're in the middle of our Women in Writing series, and today I have the great pleasure of speaking with Tamar Weissman, who is a licensed tour guide and has spent the last 2 decades teaching Tanakh and Israel studies to women. Before moving to the North 3 years ago, she was a lecturer in Matan's Jerusalem branch and is the current coordinator of the Matan Summer Programs, in Zoom and in person. She is the author of Tribal Lands, the 12 Tribes of Israel in their ancestral territories, which we'll have a chance to speak about today, and please God also working on some upcoming books. Tamar, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here.
We've sort of worked in parallel for a while, and there was a time when also we were teaching in the same room one after each other, but it's been a long time since I've seen you, so it's great to see you here.
Especially when we went in different directions. You down to the south,
yes,
and me up to the Galil,
and then I came back to Yehuda. It was a little too. It was a little too far flung for us, but we'll get there. I really would like to hear about your journey because it really is intertwined so deeply with a lot that you write about. So we're gonna please get there.
Okay.
I really always like to start off these conversations with the personal aspect, and I really want to ask you about your connection with the land of Israel, which is, runs through, it seems from afar, everything that you're doing, both in your writing and your living, and your working. And so I would love to hear how that got started, your whole connection with Israel.
Thank you. I so appreciate that question because I think that I strive for your question to be accurate to my life, that I really do see my life or the aspirations for my life to be deeply intertwined with living in Eretz Israel, with learning as much as I possibly can about Eretz Israel, with writing about Eretz Israel, with absorbing Torah Eretz Israel as much as I can. But I have to say that the journey did not begin in childhood. I had very little exposure to the idea of Eretz Israel, Medinat Yisrael, until I came here for my gap year. I grew up in a more, I wouldn't say Haredi community, I would say yeshivish community. And my formative education from kindergarten through 12th grade was in the Beis Yaakov school system. And I am very, very grateful for that experience. I think that it gave me a tremendous background in Bikiyut, in understanding the breadth of Jewish texts, especially Tanakh, but it did not give me any exposure or a value system related to the Jewish experience in Eretz Israel, other than through study of tefillah and how it would naturally come up in Jewish studies like Chumash and Halacha. But when I came here, and I was being driven in my shirut from Natbag to Hare Yerushalayim for the first time in my life. I had, I think, a sense of deep awakening. It was 11, 12 at night. And as I was driving towards Yerushalayim and I was looking around me at the landscape, I just felt a shift. And that shift has stayed with me for the entirety of my life. Bezrat Hashem, I should always feel that shift, that deep sense of longing and belonging to this land. Very hard to articulate, but always sits on me, not as a burden, but I should say maybe sits under me, like lifts me up. And I felt it at that moment. And then it, of course, deepened as I was privileged to study with, I think, some of the great luminaries of the world of Talmud Torah from 25 plus years back. And I deeply, deeply enjoyed that experience. Even though I went back to America to continue my studies there, I knew that I would be coming back here. I didn't know in what capacity. I didn't know what it was exactly that I wanted to do here, but I did know that it would be here, and I did know that it would involve Talmud Torah. So, Beis Yaakov, I would say, gave me the foundations to understand the breadth of Torah, Midreshet Moriah gave me the depth, the iyun study, the beginnings of a sense of what it meant to do a deep dive into the secrets of the Torah and the possibilities of Talmud Torah, and melding those two together in Eretz Yisrael, perhaps is what we mean by Torah Eretz Yisrael, the breadth and the depth, but rooted very much in the land itself.
And I wanted to just respond to that piece. It's always so funny when you meet someone and you recognize yourself in that journey, right? I could see myself in a lot of that very visceral description that you just offered, beautiful description. And I would describe it in many, and everybody's journey in their love relationships and marriages are very different, but I feel like it was a very similar process. It's that process, at least for me, that of falling in love, where you meet somebody and you say, oh, that's so funny. I just met you for the first few times, but I feel like I've known you forever. And it's this feeling, and that to me is that belonging that you're speaking to. You and I are unique because I was in Israel once before I came for the year, but you came for the first time. And already in my age bracket, it was a little bit more rare for the first time for someone to come to Israel be for their year, which today sounds like preposterous. But there were two young women in my group who was their first time in Israel was when they came for the year. But even, I was here once for one summer when I was 13, but it's that feeling of a homecoming, of I didn't know you until now, but it seems that I did. There's a deep part of me that knew you. And so when I've come to this place, I feel that sense of the parts fit together, right? It's like the batteries were put in and the mechanism is able to function in a much fuller way.
Very, very much so. And it was startling and a beautiful moment that I have almost on a daily basis. It hasn't left me. It's that blessed experience of being in love. And like any relationship that we hope for, it's a relationship that grows deeper and deeper with time. And as you know your lover more, then you always realize there are fresh encounters to be had.
Totally.
Because I really do see the land as dynamic, and our ability to have a relationship with the land is exactly parallel to our ability to have a relationship with a person. I think of the land as evocative, as mysterious, as fascinating, and I'm most fascinated by how people, including myself, respond to the land. So I know that this sounds a little bizarre and abstract, but I think that it does to a certain degree ring true for many of us as we drive through the land, as we explore the land, that we have fresh encounters with the land. And God forbid should they ever grow stale. Yes, I guess like any relationship, when you're used to something, ups and downs and ins and outs, and it doesn't always maintain that same excitement as, say, that initial meeting. But like we say, when men bind themselves with tefillin every morning, that barasticha li leolam, that it should always remain an erusin moment, that excitement of the initial cementing of a relationship. It should be fresh. We should be bound to Kadosh Baruch Hu, bound to this land with that freshness. So that is what I strive for, and what I think comes naturally, not only to me, but to so many of us, this deep love for the landscape and for Eretz Yisrael.
I know that we're going to delve deeper into this in the conversation, but another piece that I think is also intrinsic in what you're saying is how visceral both kinds of relationships are, meaning inherent paramount dimension of our human relationships is a physical relationship. And what's also so exhilarating about a relationship with Eretz Yisrael is that it is a spiritual connection for those of us who are engaged or believe in that we deepen through a physical connection with the land. And obviously that through working it, through visiting it, through seeing new parts and going on tiulim, it really is. It's so invigorating. And, when I go on a little tiul with my children, we went last Friday, and it's fun, but it's a deeper fun. And that for me is what is constantly rewarding in this life that I've chosen, you've chosen, and many others have chosen, is that it's a fun that goes much deeper. So it's
exactly. I think of it as an emotional connection, but that is rooted in the sichli, just like Talmud Torah. If there's no passion there, if it doesn't evoke emotion within you, then there's improvement to be had. With Talmud Torah, with Limudei Eretz Yisrael, with exploring Eretz Yisrael, there must be that basis of, like I said with Beis Yaakov, the bikiyut that was brought to fore. There has to be that the basis of understanding what it is that we're seeing, of a cognitive experience, but that cannot be what Talmud Torah or what Limudei Eretz Yisrael or relationship with Eretz Yisrael is in its entirety. There must be an emotional element. There must be passion. There must be responsiveness. It must shift us. It must change us. And so that is I would say the approach that I've always had towards Talmud Torah, and the approach I've always had towards exploring Eretz Yisrael and guiding Eretz Yisrael. And I think really is the correct approach.
Before we dive really into the book itself, which we're already really talking about actually, because it's at the essence of your book, but I just want to really make a deeper nod here to your Beis Yaakov training. It actually came up in my conversation also with Simi Peters, who also came out of the Beis Yaakov system. And she had what to say about the Beis Yaakov system now, but certainly in previous decades, she also really spoke about a rigor. You're speaking about a breadth of Torah, which is a phenomenal thing. They're able to, and I have friends who were from the Tilumi families for all different reasons, went to a real serious Beis Yaakov for elementary school. And I had always guessed that, if I never thought I was going to, but if I ever was going to have children, I married in Israel. But if I was ever going to have children in America, I was like, well, maybe I would send my kids to a Beis Yaakov elementary school, because I feel like for women particularly, they really offer like a certain rigor, and, we're not going to, and that's really something very unique. So I just want to say that in your approach to Midrash, which we're going to get at very soon, I would wonder if some of those pieces, they really do come out there. There's a certain rigor and a certain vastness and also a reverence for the whole world of Torah, which I think is a phenomenal thing that you are able to really also trace it back, that while you know what you didn't get there, you also know what you did get from that education.
Exactly. Very much so. And when I do say bikiyut and breadth, I want to pair that with what Simi was saying about rigor. I have a children's book that I read to my kids that I received in second grade, and there was a little inscription in the book that it was a gift to me for having memorized 60 some odd Mishnayot and Pirkei Avot. Now, some of them are, as short as Lefum Tzara Agra, right? But it was still an accomplishment that they expected of a second grader. And the Yediot Klaliot that we could not graduate without. One had to pass the Yediot Klaliot test in every single grade in order to move forward. One had to memorize in fourth grade all the Birkot Yaakov. One had to memorize the Birkot Moshe in sixth grade, and then Shirat Devorah and segments of Yeshayahu. Not everybody agrees with that pedagogical approach. I have to say, though, that Baruch Hashem, it served me very well, because it was not only exposure to Pshat, as you alluded to. It was also a very prolonged, for the entirety of my education there, exposure to Parshanut and Midrash. Midrash delivered through Parshanut. Because we would have tests, an 8th grade test, where we would have a couple of words of Rashi. And we would have to say, we would have to write there, what is the Dibor HaMatchil of that Rashi? It was an extraordinary Limudei Kodesh education. And I will say that I can't comment at all about the current Beis Yaakov system, but I can comment on the education that my children have received and are receiving here, and there is no parallel. to what it is that I received. So I am very, very grateful.
Yeah, this is a theme. I please God, I plan on doing a series about it in next year, but this is a topic that has come up in many, many, many episodes.
Good.
And I've mentioned, I don't know, I think in every episode that I have 4 daughters. You also, among your beautiful group of children in your home, I definitely have seen a whole bunch in the pictures. And it's a real topic. The rigor is not there. I know in my own home that we try and create that rigor in the house, and we do send our children to the most rigorous option that there is, again, because it's right for those, they're capable of it. I don't say it's right for them. I don't totally believe in that sentence, but because they're capable of it, and I want them to strive for excellence. Okay.
And I'm really glad that you're going to devote time to that, because it's an extraordinarily important topic.
Yeah, it's really critical. Okay, so let's talk about the book that you put out already. Was it 5 years ago? How many years ago was it?
More than 5 years ago. I think it came out in 2015.
2015. Okay, I guess I'm stuck before Corona, right? So we're time stopped. So your book that came out, which I want to hear how the idea came about, and I also want to say that our lives have also had this interesting parallel, because I wrote my doctorate on the tribe of Levi, not at all from the topographical perspective. I don't have any, that tour guide part is totally not, it doesn't exist within me. But I'm curious how you got really into the whole Shvatim piece. I know for me, it also came about after a shir that I had taught in Matan years before. So I'm curious how it happened.
Well, the topic was really rooted in my role as a tour guide, in that at the time I was pregnant with my 6th child, and it was a complicated, difficult pregnancy, and I could not guide. So I was thinking, how do I lay the groundwork, do something fresh and new for Be'ezrat Hashem, the time when I will be able to return to guiding? So I thought that it would be very interesting to look at the Nachalot of the Shvatim, and to try and understand the contours of those Nachalot, and to develop itineraries so that I could use them in my guiding. So I could come out with a series of guiding the Nachalot. And I needed to understand what Nachalat Dan looked like and what Nachalat Naphtali looked like in order to be able to come up with those itineraries. But that very, very quickly moved into a realization that in order for me to effectively guide the Nachalot, I really needed to have a deeper and better understanding of the Shvatim themselves. And that brought me to this mechkar and the excursies, what started as excursies and then developed into the chapters and the real thrust and focus of the book, which was the personalities of the Shvatim. And then it almost became an afterthought to work on these itineraries, but it was a natural, very fast and easy development to think of not necessarily guiding the Nachalot, but why each Shevet was given his Nachala. Because if I wouldn't say under the assumption, but with the given that the Shvatim were not just drawn to different areas of the country, but there was a certain divinely ordained decision to grant each Shevet his Nachala, then there must be something about the tract of land that Asher was given that deeply speaks to the personality of Asher. The same way that I was drawn to live in a certain area of the country and you were drawn to return to a certain area of the country, the Shvatim were uniquely suited to the Nachalot that they were granted. So the book became mostly about an exploration of the personalities of the Shvatim, and then a suggestion or suggestions or thought, thinking about why the Shevet is suited to his Nachala. And then each chapter is capped off with a tour of the Nachala, and kinds of just wearing my tour guide's hat is what you should see in this Nachala to get the most out of your Naphtali experience.
It's great. I also really want to say you're a wonderful writer, and I have a real fluidity in the way that you write and your word choices. You feel that richness. You really bring that to the paper and to the mind and heart of the one reading. I've used your book. I've used it when I've taught different classes. And I'm also curious, how is writing something you've always done? Meaning you're a tour guide, right? You've made your career in speaking and being with people. And I'm curious that kind of richness of writing, it doesn't just show up, I don't think, when you're writing in your 30s or whatever age you were. But I'm curious, where did that start?
Thank you for such high praise. I was not a writer, and it's still difficult for me to think of myself as a writer. Although more and more, as I've taken on more projects, I do start to think about the craft of writing much more. This particular book was not born out of a sense of me taking on a new profession as a writer. It just was an easy birth. I find that when there is something to say, if it's said passionately, then it is delivered. It is well received, and it is easy to deliver. Now, I know that sounds a little bit cliched or a little bit too trite or too easy, but I found that this book came extraordinarily easily, and it could very well be because it was already organized. You have these 12 shvatim. Your chapters are right there. You're not dealing with, you are definitely dealing with concepts that have to, and sometimes very complicated concepts that then have to be translated well into the written form, but a very complicated structure. So that definitely helped me. And this was a book that was birthed very, very easily. For a first birth. It was perhaps an outlier and an exception to other writers' experiences. I found that my subsequent writing projects were much more difficult than Tribal Lands. I guess perhaps because also this was, as I said, contained within that structure.
And how long did it take you to write it? Before I knew who you were, by the way, I used to see you once in a while writing in the Hebrew U Library, right? It's where you used to sit because you were living in Ma'ale Adumim.
Yes.
I don't remember how I once connected who you were, but I think, I know why, because I was starting to research my doctorate, and someone I knew from Ma'ale Adumim said, there's this woman who's writing about tribes, and she lives in Ma'ale Adumim. That's how it happened. And anyways, I remember seeing you there. How long did it take you to write the book?
It took me about a year and, I want to say a year and a half from start to finish, but there was a pregnancy in that time that, and a newborn and all of that complication. It was a lovely thing to birth this book along with this child.
Totally.
And it also gave me a tremendous motivation because I knew that, there was going to be a time when I would not be able to be as productive.
There was no better deadline than a due date. I gave in a doctorate at 39 and a half weeks pregnant. I know exactly what you're talking about. 39 and a half weeks, I drove to the university with contractions.
Exactly. So that deadline definitely works for productivity. Hebrew U was a fabulous place to gestate this book and to really be productive. Their library is open to everyone, and it is a fabulous resource. I assume it's still open to everyone. I don't have an academic library at my disposal now, but I do yearn for the days when I had that available to me. And again, I credit my Beis Yaakov education, my Midrash at Moriah education, my continuing education in other Midrashot, Matan and Nishmat, to an easy ability to research the sources, to understand the value of different sources, to be able to categorize those sources and use them as effectively as I felt I could possibly use them.
So I want to ask you about that piece, about your sources. Mm-hmm. The book itself is a big mix, okay? It's a big mix. It interweaves psukim, it interweaves midrashic readings, it obviously interweaves the topography that we've spoken about. And obviously people with an academic orientation have, different boundaries regarding their usage of different sources. And I'm interested to hear for you, what is the line between harmony and cacophony of sources and approaches? Meaning, where is your, again, you're not coming, I don't know, right? But I don't think you don't have a doctorate, right? Or a master's in formal, in something Judaica, midrash or something like that? Actually,
I do have a master's from Bar Ilan, and that was my first extensive writing piece, which was the thesis. It was on Josephus's exegetical methods.
Oh, okay.
and why he made the exegetical decisions that he did.
Yeah.
Yes, but I do deeply appreciate academic writing and academia in general, while all the while knowing that it was never going to be my voice. Although I do believe very, very strongly that in order to be effective in writing Torah, for me, and I'm only going to speak about for me, because I guess there are many different ways to write Torah, but this was true to my voice. Everything I said and say and continue to say must be sourced, and it must be a reflection of the Masorah. And I see myself very much as just a link in the Masorah, as translating that which I have been taught or that which I'm learning into the written form, or in giving shiurim as a natural chain, as we've all been taught to think of the Masorah. And so this book is copiously footnoted, not only because I'll say it definitely made me feel safe, because I feel like that is important for especially the beginner writer of Torah, to have that feeling of confidence and safety and being rooted in sources, but also because I just believe that what my role is to learn these sources, organize them, present them in a meaningful and effective way, and act as a transmitter.
I think you were very successful in doing that. I want to actually ask a very specific question. So let's take, you mentioned before, a share. Okay, a share is allotment. There are very few, if none, narratives about a share in Tanakh, right? You have tribes where, in terms of narrative, there's a lot about them. Obviously, Ephraim and Yehuda, and there are those where it's just much richer. And then you have tribes where, other than the bracha, the blessing given to them by Yaakov and Moshe, you really have very little to go on. So, in the case of someone of like a share, so there are fascinating midrashim about Asher, particularly the women of Asher. And so I'm just curious, and when you speak about being a part of the transmission, the Tanakh itself doesn't really tell us much about Asher. So for you, that means now it's my opportunity to dive into the midrashim about Asher, to understand the personality or the character of, so that you can get to the depth of why they're connected to their nachala. I'm really asking you about, like, methodologically, where that takes you. If there's no stories to move off of, so where do you go from there? I
think that question is a fascinating one, because it demonstrates, in a way, or it explains your approach to Talmud Torah. Which is, first we go to the Pshat, and we hope that the Pshat provides, right? And then we can look at sources beyond Pshat. And in a way, as you've described this book, is in a way interdisciplinary, or syncretizing different disciplines, different modalities together. That has been my approach to Torah, which is not even necessarily to ever look at Pshat without utilizing the lens of Chazal. I don't even understand such a way of learning. I've been exposed to it through Midrashet and through Matan, but it does not come naturally.
Well, because
to me,
this is where your Beis Yaakov is coming out.
Exactly,
it's coming out right here.
Exactly. And so that's why this is such a rich conversation that we're having, because you're really talking about two different methodologies and as I get older, and as this relationship with Torah deepens, and this relationship with Eretz Yisrael deepens, I appreciate more and more this, I would almost say, like a holistic rather than a linear approach. And it is an approach that takes as a given that I cannot wring everything that I can possibly wring out of Pshat unless I utilize the most sensitive readers of Pshat that we call Chazal. And so for me, Chazal provide the lens to understanding the Torah, and not just an isolated pasuk, but because their bikiyut was unparalleled, and their understanding of the Torah as an essential wholeness and unity is unparalleled. And that allows me to uncover the richness of something in its much broader context. And so for instance, if we're talking about the Bnei Yaakov and then the Shvatim, it's impossible to talk about the Shvatim without talking about the Bnei Yaakov, and vice versa. I can't talk about, say, Shimshon without talking about Dan, and I can't talk about Dan without talking about Rachel. And the entirety must come together in order for me to be true to to my task, which was to do the very best that I could to translate for people who Asher or Dan was beyond the few psukim that we have on the life of Dan or on the life of Asher, because he's so much broader than that. They are both so much broader because their experience runs from Breshit through Divrei Hayamim. And so what Chazal allow me to do is to play with the Torah, is they allow me to see the Torah as we have a Sefer Torah and we unfurl it and we fold it back into itself. And we see that we cannot just look at one isolated piece without looking at the entirety of everything dealing with any isolated piece that we might be trying to fully understand. So if we're going to take it back to, say, the Shvatim, then I can't deal with Dan without talking about his conception and anything that might have happened to him. I take Dan just as an example because I happen to be thinking a lot about Dan now in my current writing project on Shoftim, where Dan factors very, very strongly. I can't think about those psukim dealing with Dan's conception without scoping forward to the Bnei Dan in the Micha narrative. And I can't think about Dan without thinking about the Ma'asef. And I must go forward also into considering what happened with Dan. And Midrash allows me to do that. It is that beautifully indirect teaching that awakens within the students of Midrash a beyond a delight, a sense of, as we opened with, a sense of deep love for the possibilities of Talmud Torah. Because it's not, I'm in conversation with those who are far more sensitive and far more exposed to Talmud Torah than I can ever be. And so it's learning from the best.
You're saying when you're working with Midrash, you feel very much that you're a student of the teachers of Chazal, and so that you're sitting there in Chazal's classroom, and I think that you are spot on, and I believe, and I really think that your approach is very much a continuation. Chazal are the archetype of a holistic, integrative, also harmonizing, and also sometimes very dissident, depending on which midrashim you're using and comparing. But they, literally look at the Torah as one big, scramble, and they, pull things from different places. Very often they're pulling things, as you said, with tremendous sensitivity to the psukim themselves. And that, I think, is also something that Rav Meidan has taught, and Yael Ziegler has also mentioned that she has taken this very much from Rav Meidan, that very often Chazal, if you understand and look and study with rigor, are offering a very, very deep perspective on the Pshat itself. But either way, that you have really a sense of a scope and of an integration of all different relevant sources, and that, yes, it doesn't have to play by the rule book of Pshat or of things that are more specifically literary in that kind of study. Although Chazal themselves were tremendously literarily sensitive, they just didn't have the same sense of that rule book didn't exist for them. Their rule book was timeless, was boundless, did not care about genre, and it just simply they're different rules. That's all. They're simply different rules.
But to me, there's the Chazal's rule book is the only rule book that speaks to me and is really the way that I delight most and find the most love within Talmud Torah. And I will say I have not had prolonged exposure to what I would consider the more, let's say, Dati Le'umi institutions. Perhaps at some point it would do me well to learn a different rule book, but I can say though that when it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, no, I totally hear that.
For me. Yeah,
I totally hear that. And so you wrote this book, and it's a really beautiful work. And you've already mentioned that you are working on some other projects since then. I notoriously, your profession has had a rough past year and a half. I don't know if the continued writing projects was in response to the fact that, tourism died for a while, but I'm curious, what are you working on now? And is that for you, has that been a direct consequence of the previous book that you did? Like you're more open to writing now that you did it? How's that worked for you?
The book I'm working on right now, yes, it has been developed in large part to the lag that we as tour guides are all feeling. But it was, Baruch Hashem, a very welcome respite, I feel, for a lot of my colleagues. Obviously, everybody would like to be working, but it allowed for an enrichment of knowledge and, in some cases, people going back to university for another degree, taking online courses. And for me, I had the time to really start devoting to this third writing project. I'll get back to the second one in just a bit. This third one is a natural continuation from Tribal Lands. I feel like it's exciting to find my voice again after the second child, so to speak, which is still a work in progress. But this third book is picking up right where Tribal Lands in a way left off, in that I was always drawn to Shoftim as the most tribal of Sfarim within Tanakh, and as the most bizarre, outrageous Sefer, the wild child of Tanakh, as I like to think of Sefer Shoftim, which is just as rich stomping ground as exploring the personalities of the Shvatim. Maybe it is that I like working with a whole lot of different personalities as opposed to other Sfarim, which really deal with a couple of central figures. And so Shoftim is, with Shoftim, it's obviously has to be structured differently because it's not as organized as 12 tribes. It's a sefer. But I am going to try to approach it the same way, or I think I am approaching it the same way as I did with Tribal Lands, in seeing the Sefer as almost a nexus point, as a transition between what happened before, what comes after, and how patterns are revealed by Chazal through Shoftim, where if we see, for instance, I'll tell you what I've just been working on right now, with the Micha cycle, where the Levi, who has been invited by Micha to serve as his priest in his shtibel, in Micha's ad hoc temple, is described by the pasuk, Vayoel HaLevi Lashevet et Ha'ish. Now, if my Beis Yaakov B'kiyut was really up to snuff, then I would be able to say,
that's Moshe.
Okay,
Moshe and Yitro.
Moshe Lashevet et Ha'ish. Exactly. So, which is where Chazal are going to make that leap for me and enforce me to examine the context of the Moshe-Yitro relationship and what came from that Moshe-Yitro relationship and how in any way it can inform the Micha narrative beyond the fact that Moshe's grandson was this very Levi. I need to know something more than that, and Chazal will deliver a far deeper concept, which I'm not going to get into right now, but that is what drives me, what allows me to hopefully be effective in my writing, and it is great fun. If you don't find writing fun, then you shouldn't be doing it. This is that's really what I believe, that it should be a passion project, but it should also be delightful. And so So that is what I'm working on right now with Shoftim. The in-between, my liminal book, which I have handed over to Bat Nadiv Hakarmi Weinberg, because we're doing this in collaboration. We had always intended to collaborate on this work. It's way out of my wheelhouse, not coming as organically and easily as the Shoftim, and definitely not as Tribal Lands did. But this is, again, true to Midrash, where we're presenting the Midrashic approach on Esther. Yes, following the text, but really, and I think here is the very novel element based on the Petichtot in Masechet Megillah, where you have upwards of a dozen introductions to Megillat Esther that are offered by Chazal. And Rav Yochanan, Petachle Pitcha Mehai Parshata Mehacha, that when Rav Yochanan would give his drasha on Megillat Esther, he would start from left field, from a pasuk that has nothing to do with Esther. It definitely wasn't from Megillat Esther. And so the puzzle, the fun, is in trying to understand what Rabbi Yochanan saw as the central focus of the Megillah through the pasuk that he chose to quote, because these petichtot are lo muvan me'elav, not very clear at all, and through that, through the prism of these petichtot, offer the sustained midrash of Masechet Megillah.
Do you consult with academic works on those topics, or it's really you both creating from your hearts and souls?
On this one, not at all. On Shoftim, academic works, I very rarely like to look at secondary treatments. I really just I try, and I did this with Tribal Lands as well, although I am very drawn to apocryphal and pseudepigraphal literature as primary sources.
I mean, they are our earliest midrashim.
Exactly. Other than Divrei Hayamim. Yes, they are our earliest
correct.
midrashim.
Divrei Hayamim is one of the earlier midrashim, and a lot of the apocrypha.
Exactly. So, so I do like running the whole gamut of those, of midrash, and then seeing how Parshanut will translate or utilize those midrashim. But secondary literature, I come to very, very late in the game. It happened to be with Tribal Lands. There was nothing, at least not that I found. There were a few treatments, but nothing sustained. And so that I kind of took my manuscript on faith that I had done the material justice to the best of my abilities. With Shoftim, obviously, there's a plethora of written material out there. But if I didn't think that I was offering something fresh and new and maybe even groundbreaking in a presentation, then why would I do it? It would just be a waste of my reader's time and of my time.
Yeah, well, then it also might not be what your readership who you're writing towards. It also might not be what they're looking for.
Exactly.
Depends who you're trying to speak to. I really just believe in presenting something that hasn't been done before, or perhaps even hasn't been done well before. So that's where I am now with Shoftim. It sounds wonderful. I'm sure that it's going to be a really meaningful read for so many people. Bezrat Hashem. Are you going to be putting it out through the same publisher?
Not sure. We're too premature at this point. Right now, you got to love the journey and the process.
Meaning it wasn't a commissioned book. You've decided to write it, and you'll find someone to publish it.
Yeah. I don't know that I'll ever have a book commissioned. These are.
You never know. You never know, Tamar. It depends. How much you write. You never know.
Yeah.
I want to speak a little bit about where you're living right now and how that connects with everything you've spoken about until now, about your love for Eretz Yisrael, about a feeling of coming home, about feeling the tribes, essentially, living and feeling their reality. So in your introduction to Tribal Lands, you write really beautifully about the border between Naphtali and Issachar, and where you're currently living. And I would love if you could tell us a little bit about that. What brought you there? Where are you?
That's a question for the ages, as my kids would say. because obviously they were dragged along on the journey. I wouldn't say kicking and screaming, but they've all, Baruch Hashem, made their piece of it and are thriving too, Baruch Hashem. I had always, Ira and I, my husband Ira, and I had always been drawn to the Galil from when we were first married. When we came to Israel as an engaged couple, we had the freedom to go exploring the land. I was not yet a tour guide, and I hadn't even thought in that direction. But we did do a lot of Tulim, and we were always drawn back to the Galil. And it could be the quiet here. It could be the lushness. It could be a sense of promise and of opportunity, where, for whatever reason, our experience in the Merkaz, which was a blessed experience, everywhere that we have been in the Merkaz, every single community, Ramnana, Nofai Alon, Ma'ale Adumim, has been a bracha for us. And these are just fantastic communities that I so enjoy revisiting, and the relationships that we were able to make there. But we were drawn here. And it was, I would say, around 5-6 years ago, when we were, actually, I'll backtrack a little bit before that, around 12-13 years ago, when we were on the cusp of moving from Nofai Alon to a different place. We hadn't yet known which place, and we came and explored the Galil at that point, and it didn't click. And so we found our home in Ma'ale Adumim, thank God, which was so formative for our entire family for those 8 years we were there. But there was a time 5-6 years ago when Ira had started a shift of his own. And that was when he began reading and learning much more about farming and about leading a self-sufficient life and about having a relationship with the land. And that had been a piece that was missing for both of us. We didn't quite know how to articulate it, but when you live in a city or even a yishuv, there are those who are naturally drawn to planting and to providing for themselves, and that had been neither of us. I was the queen of Chad Pami and online ordering, and this definitely was not on the landscape. But then he became more and more interested in this and said, I really think that in my life I would like to see things from the beginning to the end. I would like to hatch a chick, raise the chicken in its natural habitat, eat from the chicken's eggs, slaughter the chicken myself, cook the chicken myself, and enjoy that, and have a relationship with I use that as an analogy in a way, or one example of a much broader theme of having a relationship and a deep understanding of nature and the land, and not just from an academic or let's say minutak or distant perspective, but actually being involved in what that means to shecht a chicken that you have raised yourself, and how to do so compassionately and eat that then with full appreciation of this other creature of God.
Let's not forget this is how the world functioned up until not that long ago.
Exactly, but
it's not such a far off concept. There are some of us who have been so entrenched that it's hard for us to. I in my heart and in many ways in practice live how you're describing. I don't live on a farm, and I live in a very populated neighborhood, but I understand and completely sympathize with everything you're saying.
I think that's the modern condition, and that definitely was our condition. Ira really was the one who said, I think that I need this in my life, and I think we need it in ours, and we can all do well by this. And we can see the cycles of Bria in an intimate way. And this is what I want in my life here in this world and in Eretz Israel. And this is how I will deepen my relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
I think that there's much of the Torah, by the way, that we can't understand.
Exactly. I mean,
it's kind of like when you spoke about before, when you're in Beis Yaakov and you're in 5th grade and they're teaching you Sefer Dvarim, and I'm always like, how do they learn that book if you don't talk about the whole like Israel thing? Like everything becomes a metaphor, because like the whole thing is about living in Eretz Yisrael. And I think also so much of the Torah is so theoretical. if you don't actually live a life that is somewhat agriculturally familiar. It doesn't have to be a self-sustaining, from farm to table lifestyle. Not everyone is able to handle that personality-wise or economically. It's not sustainable for them. But just even if you just talk about the Torah piece, right? So much of the Torah is based on a life that is agrarian. And so I think a lot of things become much clearer and come into focus when you at least live a life that's somewhat connected to the land.
100%. And if I were to what draws me, say, to this landscape is the ease with understanding the battle of Gidon versus the Midianim. What draws Ira to this landscape is the soil quality, the ability that we have in where we are right now to grow things and to see these processes and to experiment and to understand what it means to birth a goat and to incubate chickens and to build a large fence around your olive grove to make sure that the predators then don't attack your livestock and everything that's involved. And as he goes deeper and deeper into this, he kind of draws me along, not by force, but because I then become more interested in this. This isn't my natural passion the way that it is for him, but Misrat HaChaklaut was offering a cheese making course. So he's like, Yalla, Tamar, let's learn how to make cheese. We have this goat milk. Let's do something with it. And so that is every Tuesday for 5 hours. We learn how to make cheese. And I really, Tamar, you and I could go on. I'm with you. Like I'm only a few steps away from the farm. Really, I am. I wanna though that piece about where you're physically living, about the tribal piece. Bring us to that piece. Okay. Thank you for bringing me back to.
No, I could go as far along with you as you'd like, but I see our time as well, and I want us to hear
cheese
that.
And goats back to Naphtali and Yisachar. So it happened to be that Steilan, which is the meshek that we found. We found the meshek, we found the farm, and then we found the community. And Baruch Hashem, they go hand in glove. A beautiful, beautiful community, a Moshav Dati. Up here in the Lower Golan, in the Lower Galil, with salt of the earth, wonderful people who give us from their vast stores of knowledge. Happens to be that the Nachal that runs right smack dab through the Moshav is Nachal Adami, which is known in Sefer Yoshua as Adami HaNekev, which forms the northern border of Yisachar and the southern border of Naphtali. So on my daily walk, I'm walking from Yisachar and Naphtali and back. A landscape that was very, very foreign to me as a Bat Yehuda, and I would say living, elsewhere in the center of the country, more Ephraim area. And now being up in Yisachar and Naphtali, I feel that it has opened up new paths for me, new ways to understand the world. I don't like to put the cart before the horse. I don't like to say that, okay, I have discovered these things within me, and so naturally I'm going to relate them back to what it is that I know, which is the personality of Yisachar, who's the Jewish farmer and the Ben Torah, and the personality of Naphtali, who is the binder within the nation, the communicator, he who can connect the different elements within Am Yisrael. But I think that when you change your landscape and when you move to a different place, Shoneh Makom, Shoneh Mazal perhaps is at work, that you find different kochot and you find yourself responding to your reality differently. And that definitely has happened with me, and that's what I was trying to relate to in this introduction to the second edition. And that's why I had asked Rabbanit Shani Tarragon to relate the Yehuda piece. She who is in Alon Shvut, in your stomping grounds, and very much a deep friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, who I had always seen as, in a way, the voice of Yehuda par excellence, and how these different elements within Am Yisrael are also reflected in the landscapes in which we both chose to make our homes. So I was happy with this move. I am happy with this move, and Be'ezrat Hashem, it should bring much bracha.
No, I mean, it's a big one. Also, you're moving with kids of all different ages. Yeah. Some they'll remember this as their home, and others who this is a big change for them. What you're speaking to reminds me of a quote that I love from an Irish poet philosopher, John O'Donoghue, who wrote, he passed away tragically a few years ago, very, very suddenly. He wrote a treatise on beauty and a bunch of other things. And one of the things that he speaks about is he said that when you wake up in the morning, you should look out onto a landscape that is more alive than you are. And that we draw so much strength and a vitality from the landscape around us. And for everybody, that means something different. And I will just share personally that when we lived in the South, we were living essentially in Nachalat Shimon. And I want to thank Shani Tarragon. Oh, she's featured nicely in this episode today. She actually pointed this out to me, and she's like, you don't want to live in Shimon. This was already when we came back to Yehuda, and my husband was born Yerushalmi. He was not happy living in Shimon. It did not work well for him. And I hadn't thought about it through the prism of the Nachalot, but when she spoke about it that way, I said, wow, she said, you're Yehuda. Come on, you're classic Yehuda. What are you looking for, But what I wanted to say was that what we didn't realize, and you're speaking about the opposite, you're speaking about a sense of coming alive and a sense of things becoming more vibrant and the colors becoming even more bold as you made this change, which may have been catalyzed by your husband more than you, but that it has shifted everything for everyone and mostly in blessed ways. And it was interesting because I really experienced the opposite, and we weren't expecting that. Meaning when you move, 2 hours away, you're moving far from family, you're changing gears in life. When we had, quite a number of children, and we weren't old, but we weren't so young anymore. And what we hadn't expected was how much the landscape would, if it's not good for you, how much it would bother us, how much it would really cause almost like an internal, middle depression we lived right on an agam, right? And I ran there, and that was phenomenal. We love going out, my husband and I. It's really, critical for our survival of being out in nature. And that was phenomenal. 5-minute walk, going around the Nagam, a man-made lake, and really just a lot of beautiful, landscape there. But if we drove 2 minutes, we were in complete and utter desert, and there was nothing around us. And that was not right for both of us. And in those 2 years that we were there, I really thought about that quote from Donoghue, that piece of, for some people, the desert around them feels alive and full of promise, right? That's the Torah given in the desert. We've heard that word before, right? And for some people, the desert is that for them. And for us, it wasn't, right? For us, the desert just was empty, and we needed growth around us. We needed the green. We needed to breathe that oxygen. But I think that what you're speaking to is also this point that I really encourage all of us listening to think about, of what are the landscapes that make us feel alive? What is it around us? When I look out my window, and it's a little bit crowded around me in the neighborhood I live in, but I look out my window of one of my overlooks, and I see the hills that I fell in love with when I was much younger. And that is invigorating to me. And so I love this journey you're bringing about moving to this border between Naphtali and Yisachar, and the self-sustaining vision that you're putting into practice day in and day out.
You put it very beautifully, and circling back to that quote by Donoghue, was it?
Yeah.
Right. And about the landscape being more alive than you are in those early morning minutes, just is exactly, I think, our responsiveness to where we are right now. When I think about Ma'ale Adumim, and I think about my neighbors who daily will post these gorgeous pictures of the northern part of Midbar Yehuda and Harei Moav, and they're just the most stark and evocative pictures. And on my daily walks, I would say that it doesn't work for me the way that it works for them. It doesn't inspire me the way that it inspires them. And my landscape is a field And yes, we definitely have Har Tavor looming in the background, and the Golan visible from where I am. But and just off to the west, all of the beautiful rolling hills of the Lower Galil. And it does for me what the Harei Yehuda do for you, and the Harei Yerushalayim as you make your commute to Yerushalayim, where you live with the strong connections with Derech Avot and the tremendous history of that area of the country, and where I live with an equally tremendous history, perhaps a little bit harder to uncover and discover, but it's so beautiful that there are so many areas, vastly different one from the other, that speak to the different parts of Am Yisrael. And we will always remain the 12 Shvatim, each one of us bringing to the table what it is that we can bring. And that I moved to Yisachar and Naphtali does not make me a Bat Yisachar or Bat Naphtali, but it definitely makes me think differently about my life and about what it is that I can contribute to Am Yisrael. And perhaps it's those kochot that's also informing my work right now. And I'm just so gratified to hear of your not knocking those who live in Shimon.
Totally.
Because Shimon is an essential element to Am Yisrael.
Totally.
But and I hope, as Rav Hashem, to have the opportunity to get to know you more. But I could have summed you up within the first 5 minutes as a Bat Yehuda in its entirety, with all of that malchut and with all of that strength and the regalness that you bring to and you and by extension your family bring to Am Yisrael. And Kama Tov Shachazart. It's good that you came back.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that, Tamar. Really, really, I do. Okay, I don't want to have to end this, but we're going to have to wrap up. I see our time. I sort of usually have a round of lightning questions, but honestly, you've also answered some of them in the most beautifully organic way. And so I think I just want to end with two questions. One is, what books are currently on your nightstand? That's a question I can never leave behind.
Okay. Well, I have a friend in Ramat Beit Shemesh who has a library, and when she sees me, she's constantly bringing me books. Why? Because when I turned 40, I said, Yalla, I'm going to start reading fiction. Up until then,
nice.
I have not read fiction at all. And I said, it's important for me to be broad and wide. As with this move up to the north, I wanted to extend my exposure.
Very nice.
So I just read a book called 1,000 Acres by a woman named Jane Smiley, I think. Jane Sweeney, I don't recall.
Yeah, Sweeney.
Sweeney, okay. Mm-hmm. I could relate to very, very much in terms of her landscape, but beyond that was extraordinarily written. But even beyond that book, the one I had read right before that my friend Kara keeps on peppering me with was Eleanor Oliphant is okay, is doing all right, or something like that. It's also just a beautifully written and very powerful book. And it's like tasting dessert for the first time, reading fiction. And I feel I had filled myself up on all of this roughage and all of and the meat and potatoes of life. And now I'm being exposed to people who can really make me think about the world and the complex flavors of the world in a new way, a totally new course even.
Yeah, you know what I'm also loving about this conversation, which is that for everyone listening, and I think most of us know that this is true, but it's a great reminder of how much life is a journey and that we grow and develop in unexpected ways that we would never have even thought of for ourselves. And also is a great lesson in here, I'm just saying, just to put things like really in everyone's face, it's a great lesson in accepting and flowing with the creativity and unexpectedness of our spouses, which is not something that should be taken for granted. That's one of the the big keys in the world of couples counseling, of being open to our partners, and also children, by the way, works just the same for them, being open to their ability to change and transform, which at once is scary sometimes, and it forces us to also be flexible. But if we're able to find a harmony within that, which of course harmony has moments of disharmony, but if we can find harmony in that, then it can breed so many new things in ourselves and in our relationships.
100%. So the third book on my night table, which is a nod to what you just said, is Michael Pollan's The Food We Eat,
yes,
which I was having me reread for the third time. He goes through Michael Pollan just about annually.
Yes.
He's gone through it but he's a fabulous writer who is then presenting all the elements that are so much essential part of our lives right now.
Yeah, it's a great book. Okay, another question. Mm-hmm. Okay, your favorite tefillah, but you're going to have to give it in one sentence because we're winding down here on the time.
My favorite tefillah is I got to say three. One is Elokai Neshama. And then the second is Asher Yatzar. And then the third, which I have tremendous kavanah, is Belim Kalalai Nafshi Sidom and Nafshi Kafar Lakotia. And I'll end with that.
Wow. Okay. Last one. If you could have coffee or tea, whatever you drink, or a naturally squeezed cup of orange juice, whatever it is that you like, with anyone, alive, dead, famous, mundane, who would it be?
Ira.
Oh, okay. Love that. Before we end, I would like to just briefly mention the Matan Summer Programs, which Tamar is the coordinator for, along with Serena Novik. I wanted just to tell everyone about the programs. The first one this summer is a week-long in-person program taking place from June 27th to July 1st, and it will study Israel's flora and fauna. And the second is a 2-week Zoom program taking place from July 4th to July 15th. The classes will take place during Israel's afternoon and U.S. morning times, intended to make Matan learning accessible to our annual summer students who are still not able to get here this year. We'll dig deep into Jewish FOMO, finding our place within the family of nations. And Tamar will be coordinating. I'll make a very brief appearance in one of the programs. And I really wanted to thank you for this conversation. I have to tell you, this has been soul opening and heart opening in a way that I didn't even anticipate. So I'm really grateful that we've had this opportunity to sit here.
Thank you. Yosefa, may this be the first of many conversations, personal, public, that you and I have.
Amen. I would really, really look forward to that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. I'm Dr. Yosefa Fogel-Rubel, and this is One-on-One Women Talk Torah, a series brought to you by Matan Women's Institute for Torah Study. Thank you to the entire Matan team for their input. Please do One-on-One and Women's Torah Learning a small favor by sharing this podcast with family and friends so that we can reach new listeners. You can stream and download these episodes on Spotify, iTunes, and Matan's website, and write us any feedback at podcast@matan.org.il. That's podcast@matan.org.il. Thanks for listening, everyone.